doing exercise, I think we can offer them some sort of sweets or something that I will allow you to take sweet for one day. So by that way also they will get motivated to do exercise and lose weight.
I think they get motivated with small, but the portion will increase, we don't know.
So for the next session, I would like to invite Dr. Vidisha Patel, ma'am. She is a consultant diabetologist. She had done advanced courses in diabetes at RSSDI and Jaipur National University. She had also done PG diploma in clinical endocrinology and diabetes. She has a special interest in type 1 diabetes and GDM. She organized various camps and awareness program on type 1 and type 2 diabetes and GDM. She had published papers and abstract at various national conferences. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, chairpersons, and I welcome you all for the Day 2 Practical Diabetology Conference 2025 as an organizing secretary. And I like to see a very good audience, and thank you so much, Toshniwal sir, for giving us the support. It means a lot to us. So my topic for today is obstructive sleep apnea in diabetes, the routine care considerations. The flow of my talk today will be understanding what is obstructive sleep apnea, the epidemiology, the risk factors, clinical symptoms, signs and symptoms, and the correlation between OSA and type 2 diabetes. Definitely we'll go through the diagnosis, systemic approaches, and the treatment. As we know, OSA is a treatable chronic disorder. Yes, it is characterized by complete or partial obstruction of the upper airway. The obstructions may cause intermittent hypoxia or hypercapnia. Also, it causes increased oxidative stress, inflammation, and sleep fragmentation. The adverse effects of OSA are very important because they are the mediators of metabolic, cardiovascular, and neurocognitive risk. The true prevalence and the incidence in India is lacking because of the multicentric population-based studies are not yet that much clearly done. But OSA prevalence consistently is higher in men than compared to the women across the studies. The signs, the symptoms, if we see, they are day and night, nocturnal and daytime symptoms. At night, we see snoring, choking or gasping at night, observed episodes of breathing cessation during sleep, night sweats, maintenance insomnia, erectile dysfunction, nocturia, heartburn, awakening with nocturnal chest pain, awakening with a dry mouth or sore throat. Commonly, most of the symptoms are seen in this. Daytime symptoms, if we see, excessive daytime sleepiness, neurocognitive impairment, heartburn, morning headaches, awakening with chest pain, difficulty in concentrating during the daytime, mood changes such as depression, irritability, and high blood pressure. If we see physical examination, mostly patients we see they are obese, but not necessarily all obese. Thin, lean patients also may develop obstructive sleep apnea. Enlarged neck circumference, crowded upper airway, hypertension, attenuated P2 heart sounds, nasal obstruction, decreased oxygen saturation, and lower extremity edema. Now, as we are talking about obesity, OSA, and type 2, so there is a metabolic triangle between the three, and when there is a poor glycemic control, there is insulin resistance and incidence of type 2 diabetes, as we all know. The sleep disorders, breathing, and snoring are independent predictors of metabolic dysfunction. Also, as I mentioned in my earlier slide, not necessarily all obesity patients, but even the low BMI patients less than 25 can also have high risk of obstructive sleep apnea. South Asians face similar OSA risk as compared to the Western counterpart despite low obesity rates. Coming to the weight gain, if there is around 10% of weight gain, we have a chances of 6 times higher fold of obstructive sleep apnea risk, and the prevalence is around 87% in obese patients with type 2 diabetes. If we see a link between it, so I'll just summarize this slide. There is a decrease in pancreatic insulin resistance and increase in the hepatic glucose production. The incretin hormones that are GLP-1 and GIP, they are the key insulin responders, as we know, are also influenced by autonomic nervous system activity. So the norepinephrine, which are a marker of sympathetic activity, decreases with CPAP in the blood glucose and urine. So a lab-based study with type 2 and OSA patients showed a CPAP lowers 24 hours norepinephrine without altering the cortisol or the growth hormone levels. So a rodent study showed a beta cell dysfunction and death due to the intermittent hypoxia. Recovery may be incomplete even after hypoxia ends. So it is all interlinked, as I mentioned. OSA can lead to intermittent hypoxia, which in turn can increase the sympathetic neural activity, oxidative stress, systemic inflammation, and alteration of circulating endopokines. And as we know, in type 2 diabetes also, there is an increase in the insulin resistance along with the beta cell dysfunction, and it can cause micro and macrovascular complications. The pathophysiological cascade, sleep fragmentation can lead to autonomic overdrive, intermittent hypoxia leading to oxidative stress and inflammation, hypoxia, impaired functions of beta cell, livers, and adipose tissues. Disturbed sleeps, altered hormones like ghrelin increases and leptin decreases. Sleep duration matters, yes, as we all know, less than 5 hours or more than 9 hours can increase the risk of type 2 diabetes. And evidence for the improvement will go in the next slide. I'll show it to you in detail. Coming to the screening and diagnosis of OSA. So 80% of moderate to severe OSA are remaining undiagnosed. Early diagnosis can definitely improve the quality of life, reduce severe risk, and guide the management. Screening approaches are the clinical history, which is very easy and you can do by just seeing the patients and ask few questions, and you can get an idea of OSA. So, and the questionnaires and physical examinations. Common tools which we can practice is stop questionnaires and stop bang questionnaires. I'll come to that in my next slide, and which is very low cost and practically it is possible in any of the primary settings. Coming to the physical signs, when the patient comes to the clinic, we can just see the patient, see the chin to thyroid distance. The BMI, we can observe narrowing of the oropharyngeal opening and the thick neck. Confirmatory the test by polysomnography, that is PSG, which can be done at lab and also at a home setting with a portable machine. Measurement of the apnea hypoxia index, which is totaling of the apnea and hypopnea and then totaling it by the number of sleep disturbances. Simultaneously, we can record EEG of the brain, EOG of the eye, EMG of the muscle, and ECG of the heart. Respiratory efforts, airflow, and oxygen levels can be maintained. Now, examination, clinical history, as I was mentioning about the stop questionnaires, that is, you can ask the question about the snoring, tiredness, observed apnea, and high blood pressure. Stop bang is the additional with the stop, that is BMI, age, neck circumference, and the gender. Coming to the BMI, yes, increased BMI, reduced distance and increased angles of the chin to thyroid cartilage and narrowing of the oropharyngeal opening. AHI, yes, adding all the apnea and hypopnea as I said and dividing it by the total sleep time. Now, should all the patients with type 2 diabetes be screened for OSA? Thin, lean patient also can have OSA, so a few questionnaires won't take much of your time, but yes, having a documentation of it might help in future to the patients. Type 1 diabetes studies has also showed sleep disorders and OSA in normal weight individuals, impaired glucose control and neuroendocrine functions. And small studies of OSA with prevalence of 40% in adults and with type 1 diabetes has also been observed. This is the same slide. Coming to the RSSDI recommendations. RSSDI also recommend to screen the patient of the high risk who are having obesity, comorbid morbidities, signs and symptoms of OSA. BMI, yes, more than 22 to 25. Abdominal obesity in men is more than, if it is there, more than 90 centimeter. In women, more than 80 centimeter. Neck circumference more than 16 for men, more than 17 for women, and craniofacial abnormalities are there. You have to ask few the questions, that is stop and stop bang questionnaires. Diagnosis will come to the next slides, and treatment also in detail I'll be mentioning in the next slide. Eligibility of the patients who are subjected to the overnight monitoring, that is PSG, by it should be done by the trained professionals, and it is diagnosed. The cutoff of the AHI, if you see, for the mild OSA is 5 to 15 episodes. For moderate, it is 15 to 30 episodes, and for severe, it is more than 30 episodes. This all recommendations. We know overweight individuals have habitual snoring, apnea, daytime sleepiness. Family members who have history of type 2 diabetes, and overweight children at puberty, which are we seeing very commonly nowadays. Young adolescent people are having obesity, and they should also be screened for OSA. Now, diagnostic test, if we go to, the very gold standard test is the PSG. It requires a lab setup, but again, as I mentioned, it can be done at home with trained technicians. Repeat of PSG in high-risk patients with the predisposing factors are important, and they offer a cost-effective and faster diagnosis. Which the patients which are not recommended for the PSG are the patients who have neuromuscular disorders, moderate to severe pulmonary disease, congestive heart failure, strokes, seizures, insomnia, or movement disorders. Home-based test, cardiorespiratory tests, which are useful for initial screening for children and morbid obesity individuals, CPAP titrations and follow-up. Sleep night study in 3 parts it is done, and it is recommended for, first is for the diagnosis phase, second is for the CPAP titration. Coming to the treatment part, lifestyle modification is the main foundation of the OSA. First line approaches of all the obese patients, regardless of the OSA severity. We should always motivate the patients for weight loss via physical activity, dietary changes, and as now we know, we have anti-obesity drugs also. So we should put that in front of the table to the patient of the options of anti-obesity drugs also. Avoidance of definitely alcohol, smoking, and sedatives is crucial. Benefits extend to glucose control, cardiovascular risk, and overall sleep hygiene. Should always accompany other treatment modalities that I'll be coming now. CPAP. CPAP is the gold standard. Symptomatic patients with more than 5 AHI, more than 15. Auto CPAP is the first line, deliver continuous a pressure air distributed during the sleep. It is a automated continuous pressure. It relieves upper airway obstruction, improves sleep quality and daytime alertness. Challenges, yes, it is very discomfort for the patient sometimes when they want to sleep and it is actually giving a continuous pressure, they might not able to sleep. So that is a very commonly seen mask disturbances are there, intolerance and poor adherence of the patient. Coming to the BiPAP setting, CPAP, if it is intolerable, hypoventilation syndrome and overlap with COPD and neuromuscular disorders, BiPAP should be considered. Oral appliances are also available. Mandibular advancement devices are most commonly used. Tongue retaining devices are less tolerated and effective. Again, adherence and the monitoring is difficult but subjective to use, often higher than CPAP. There are few of the surgeries, I'll just name them out. Nasal surgeries, palatal surgeries, tongue-based surgeries, maxillomandibular advancement surgeries. Surgeries are individual and typically follows failure or poor response to conservative therapy. My takeaway messages: OSA often coexist with metabolic disorders like type 2 diabetes. Screening is essential in high-risk individuals. Diagnosis of OSA relies on PSG, a gold standard diagnostic tool, but portable and home-based tests are also now very much seen for the patients and we can advise them. CPAP therapy remains the gold standard treatment. Success depends on the patient's adherence and follow-up for that and the titration. Oral appliances and surgical options are the alternatives, especially in CPAP intolerant patient or those who have anatomical abnormalities. Lifestyle interventions as weight loss, avoiding alcohol and sedatives are recommended for all the patients with OSI. And I complete on time, so thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful session.
And one thing I want to mention for the sleep, now there is also a Zolpidem oral spray that is with the Zol Swift. So you can have 2 puff of it, and 1 puff delivers around 5 mg, 2 puff 10 mg. So that is also very useful nowadays. You can advise to the patients who have disturbed sleep. Thank you.
Is it necessary that all the patients who have got excessive snoring would have sleep apnea?
Not necessary, but yes, again, as I mentioned, stop and bang questionnaires, and you can have PSG once done, and then we can screen and diagnose the patients according to that. If they have a repeated complaint of snoring, and for that, especially not asking the patient, you have to ask the wife or the family members who are with them. They would know more. A person who is snoring, he won't say I snore. Person next to him will only come with the patient and say, भाई ये तो सोते सोते इतने खराटे खाता है, सोने ही मुझे नहीं देता. So that is very common. So screening, yes, it is important. As I mentioned, not necessarily. Even if you have type 2 diabetes patient and they're obese and all, just a question, simple question is very important.
And is it true that if sleeping on the lateral position will reduce the sleep apnea? Rather than in a supine position, if we sleep on the right or left lateral position,
Excuse me.
it will.
Excuse me to interrupt. We are running short of time, so can we take questions at the end of the session?
I'll get in touch with you, sir,
Yeah,
personally.
sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt, but thank you very much, ma'am, for your nice talk. Now